carrots have a relatively high sugar content for a vegetable, and when we have sugar, we can get caramel. The key to my carrot cake recipe is the caramelized carrot puree that takes advantage of the starch, moisture, and sugar content of this wonderful vegetable. It supplies a caramelly yet earthy carrot flavor and a beautiful natural orange color for the cake. For the add-ins, of course, we're gonna supply the requisite shredded carrots, but if you wanna do nuts and raisins, I've tested the recipe. It works just as well with as it does without, but I also was curious about what you wanted, so I did a poll on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, and the vast majority of you all wanted a cake with just shredded carrots, about 67% of you all, so that's what we're gonna do today. Okay, since my recipe calls for both shredded and chopped carrots, I usually shred first. I measure out how many carrots I need in total by weight, then start peeling and shredding. If you have a box grater, you'll want to grate your carrots using the smaller holes. In general, you'll want the add-ins like nuts or fruit or the carrots to be on the finer side. That's going to help your crumb look a little more uniform. And anyone who grates an entire carrot clearly likes to live a life of danger and excitement. So I grate until the last quarter of the carrot or so, and then save the ends because we'll need that for the carrot puree. Add those shredded carrots to a bowl and cover them so they don't dry out. Don't blot them or anything. We're going to use these carrots and even the water contained within them to give our cake flavor and moisture. So now on to the secret sauce, or should I say secret puree of this recipe, which is the caramelized carrots. So take the amount of carrots required for the carrot puree portion of the recipe and chop them into quarter-inch slices. And like I said in the beginning of the video, carrots are relatively sweet compared to other veggies. But what exactly does that mean? Like more than celery or eggplant? Taste is subjective. Could it just be my opinion? So I got this thing called a refractometer. It quantifies the amount of sugar content in liquids because light bends or refracts based on the molecules, specifically sugar, in that liquid. So let's try to see comparatively how sweet our carrots are by extracting some juice from various fruits and veggies. I've got a Fuji apple, which is one of the sweeter varieties. A Japanese sweet potato has kind of a sweet and nutty flavor. A yellow beet, which I grabbed because a portion of the sugar sold in the US is from beets. It's not this variety in particular, but it's called a sugar beet, but those are kind of hard to find. And of course we have carrot for our carrot cake. I try to think about what specific ingredients bring to my recipes, and it might be the scientist in me, but being able to quantify something as subjective as a sweet taste is really interesting and actually can be very useful. So let's measure them. The output or number on the screen is referred to as the Brix percentage. Specifically, 1 degree is equal to 1 gram of sugar per 100 grams of solution. And these numbers might not mean a lot to you unless you're into looking at Brix percentages, which is why I threw in the Fuji apple. It kind of gives us sweetness context. I mean, we've probably all had an apple before. So for each one, I take 3 measurements and record the average. And for the apple, it gives me 15.9, which means 15.9% of this apple juice is sugar. For the Japanese sweet potato, I got 9.7. For the yellow beet, 8.5. And finally, our carrot gives us 10.5. And to maximize that amount of sugar and carrot flavor in our recipe, we're going to roast the carrots. To do that, I'm going to take a large baking dish and add the butter. Let this melt in an oven that's been preheated to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, which should take about a couple minutes. Then stir in the salt and baking soda, and then the rest of your carrots. And then give that a good stir to coat them in that melted butter. You're then going to cover the pan with some foil and bake it in that oven for about 35 to 45 minutes, removing the foil in the last 15 minutes to get some extra browning. You're going to want your carrots to look and feel like this, kind of mashable with a fork with some browned edges. And to make the puree, you can use a food processor or blender and then set this aside to cool for at least 15 minutes. See, when we roast our vegetables, we've reduced some of the water. By doing that, we've increased the ratio of sugar in our puree. In addition, we've also used a high heat to caramelize those carrot sugars, so kind of 2 birds with 1 stone. Okay, now we're going to prep the other components of our batter, starting with the dry ingredients. In a mixing bowl, whisk together flour, baking powder, salt, cinnamon, and allspice. In a measuring cup, add your cooled caramelized carrot puree, sour cream, and vanilla extract, and stir together. And you're going to set that aside as well. Now we're going to start to make our batter. Add some softened butter to the bowl of a mixer, along with either light or dark brown sugar. And with the paddle attachment, mix this on high speed for about 3 minutes. You're going to want to scrape down once during this time. Then you're going to add in canola or vegetable oil and mix that for another 2 minutes.
minutes. When it's finished, it should be lighter in color and slightly fluffier. Now add in all your egg yolks at once. And if you ever wonder why we add egg yolks separately or first before we add in whole eggs, it's because the yolks contain these magic molecules called emulsifiers, specifically lecithin. They hold fat and water-based ingredients together so it doesn't look broken. So after it's all mixed in, you're going to want to add the whole eggs one at a time, or two at a time, and mix just until it doesn't look curdled anymore like this. And that's the magic of egg yolks. Now grab your flour and carrot puree mixture. We're gonna alternate ingredients. We're gonna add the flour in 3 additions and the carrots in 2, just like this. So we're gonna start with half the flour, run the mixer on low speed until it's mostly added in, then stop the mixer, use a spatula, and then kind of scoop the bottom. Now add in half of your carrot puree and do the same thing, low speed until it's added in, then scrape the bottom. Now add in half of the remaining flour mixture, scrape, and then the rest of the carrot puree mixture, and then scrape. And for the last flour addition, I like to do this by hand with a spatula. This kind of avoids overmixing. And this is also when we add in those shredded carrots that we set aside, as well as any additional add-ins. Now just stir with your spatula, making sure to break up any clumps of carrots, which actually like to stick together really badly. Now pour the batter into your prepared pans. And I'm baking 3 8-inch cakes, so my cake pans are sprayed liberally with canola oil spray, and the bottoms are lined with parchment paper circles. This cake is a little thicker than my other batters, so be sure to smooth out the tops to get an even surface, and then tap the pan on the counter a few times to settle the batter. Any of my cake recipes can be made in multiple sizes. I created my cake recipe app because I hated converting recipes, so choose whatever you need, cupcakes, sheet cakes, mini cakes, whatever, and the app will generate the recipe for you. This pan size goes into the middle of an oven preheated to 350 for around 35 minutes. You'll know the cake is done when a skewer comes out clean, but I also temp my cakes. I look for a temperature around 200 to 212 Fahrenheit. I then place my cakes on a rack to cool slightly. Now I'm going to frost this cake tomorrow, so here's how I keep my cake on the counter. After about 10 to 15 minutes and the pans and the cake inside are definitely still warm, I run a knife around the perimeter. Then I flip them out into my hand, peel off the parchment, and flip them back over onto a piece of plastic wrap. I like to trim the tops off at this point sometimes because I can see if my cakes are good and if the crumb came out okay. And this one looks all right, has a few big air holes probably due to undermixing, but we don't waste cake around here, so this is getting used. I then carefully wrap the warm cake. I make sure it's airtight, but not so tight that it deforms the shape of the cake, and all that moisture that would have evaporated due to the heat of the cake is now trapped inside, ensuring that the cake will be delicious and moist when it's ready to serve. I keep these on my counter until I'm ready to use them, and we'll do this if I'm frosting a cake within 48 hours of baking. Okay, it's the next day, and I'm ready to assemble and frost my carrot cake. Here I'm using my butter cream cheese frosting, which is a stable version of cream cheese frosting, which you'll see. I'm able to fill this 8-inch cake and get super smooth sides, which I've never been able to get with any other cream cheese frosting before. I'm also attempting some piping work and recently have been ogling over that vintage or Lambeth style cake. They're more ornate and sometimes whimsical, but do keep in mind that if you do this with any of my recipes, you'll need to increase the amount of frosting by at least 50%. There's quite a bit extra that you'll need to get that effect.